The courtroom door slammed shut, sealing the air with a suffocating weight. Amara Jackson, 7 months pregnant, stood alone at the defendant's table, her hands trembling as they rested on her belly. She wasn't just fighting for herself, she was fighting for the life inside her. And the eyes of the world were watching. The judge's gavel cracked like a whip, silencing the murmurs of the packed courtroom. Judge Harold Grayson, a man whose reputation for bias preceded him, leaned forward, his thin lips curling into a sneer. "Ms. Jackson," he drawled, his voice dripping with condescension, "do you really expect this court to believe your sob story? A black woman, pregnant, claiming innocence in a theft case? Please." The gallery gasped, a collective intake of breath that seemed to suck the oxygen from the room. Amara's heart pounded, but she held her chin high, refusing to let his words break her. She knew the odds were stacked against her, knew the system had already judged her before she'd uttered a word. This wasn't just a trial, it was a battlefield. Amara, a 28-year-old nurse, had been accused of stealing medical supplies from the hospital where she'd worked for 5 years. The evidence? A grainy security video and the testimony of a white coworker who claimed she'd seen Amara pocketing vials of insulin. Never mind that Amara had been on maternity leave prep, or that the coworker, Karen Phelps, had a history of clashing with her over petty workplace politics. The truth didn't seem to matter, not in this courtroom. Not in this town where racial lines were drawn in invisible ink. Amara's lawyer, Claire Evans, stood beside her, a fierce contrast to the judge's smug demeanor. Claire, a 40-year-old public defender with a reputation for taking on hopeless cases, had spent weeks digging into Amara's story. Her sharp green eyes scanned the room, taking in the judge's mockery, the opposing attorney's smirk, and the jury's uneasy glances. She knew this case was bigger than one woman. It was a microcosm of a system that chewed up people like Amara and spat them out broken. But Claire had something up her sleeve, something no one in the room expected. "Your Honor," Claire began, her voice steady but laced with an edge that made the gallery lean forward. "My client is not only innocent but a victim of a deliberate setup rooted in prejudice." The judge chuckled, a low, mocking sound that sent a chill down Amara's spine. "Prejudice?" he scoffed. "That's a bold claim for a woman with no evidence to back it up. You're wasting this court's time, counselor." The gallery erupted in whispers, some indignant, others gleeful. Amara felt the weight of their stares, some pitying, some accusing. She wanted to scream, to tell them she'd never stolen a thing in her life, that she'd spent her career saving lives, not ruining them. But she stayed silent, trusting Claire to fight for her. Her baby kicked inside her, a small reminder of why she couldn't give up. Claire didn't flinch. She opened her folder, pulling out a single sheet of paper that seemed to hum with significance. "Your Honor, I'd like to present new evidence that will not only exonerate my client, but expose a pattern of misconduct in this case." The judge's smirk faltered, just for a moment, but it was enough to send a ripple of anticipation through the room. The opposing attorney, Richard Holt, shot to his feet. "Objection. This is a stunt. There's no new evidence on the discovery list." "Sit down, Mr. Holt," Claire snapped, her voice cutting through the tension like a blade. "This evidence was uncovered last night, and it changes everything." She held up the paper, her hands steady despite the storm brewing around her. "This is a sworn affidavit from a hospital security technician who reviewed the original footage. The video submitted as evidence was tampered with, edited to make it appear Ms. Jackson was stealing." The courtroom exploded. Jurors shifted in their seats, reporters scribbled furiously, and the judge's face reddened. "Order!" he bellowed, slamming his gavel. "Ms. Evans, you'd better have proof of this outrageous claim, or I'll hold you in contempt." Amara's heart raced. She hadn't known about this affidavit, hadn't known Claire was working behind the scenes to uncover the truth. She glanced at her lawyer, who gave her a small, reassuring nod. For the first time in weeks, hope flickered in Amara's chest. Claire continued, undeterred. "The technician, Mr. Daniel Ortiz, is prepared to testify that the original footage shows Ms. Jackson leaving the supply room empty-handed. Furthermore, He discovered metadata indicating the video was altered by someone with access to the hospital's security system, someone with a motive to frame my client. The gallery buzzed, the air electric with shock and outrage. Karen Phelps, seated in the witness stand, went pale, her hands twisting in her lap. Amara noticed, and a cold realization hit her. Karen had always resented her promotions, her rapport with patients, her refusal to bow to subtle workplace slights. Could she have orchestrated this? Your Honor, Claire pressed. This affidavit also includes testimony from 2 other hospital employees who overheard Ms. Phelps making racially charged remarks about Ms. Jackson, expressing a desire to put her in her place. This isn't just a case of theft, it's a case of targeted discrimination. The judge's face darkened, but he didn't interrupt. The jury, a mix of faces from different walks of life, leaned forward, their expressions a mix of disbelief and anger. Amara felt a tear slip down her cheek, not from sadness but from the weight of being seen, truly seen, for the first time in this ordeal. Richard Holt jumped up again. This is hearsay, unsubstantiated claims designed to inflame the jury. His voice was shrill, betraying his panic. Claire didn't blink. Then let's call Mr. Ortiz to the stand, she said coolly. Let him explain how the footage was manipulated and by whom. The judge hesitated, his eyes darting between Claire, Amara, and the restless gallery. Amara could almost see the gears turning in his mind, his reputation, his control over the courtroom, all hanging in the balance. Very well, he said finally, his voice tight. Call your witness. As Daniel Ortiz took the stand, a wiry man in his 30s with nervous hands but a steady gaze, the room seemed to hold its breath. He swore in, his voice quiet but clear. I've worked in hospital security for 10 years, he began. When Ms. Evans asked me to review the footage, I found discrepancies. The timestamp was off, and the frames were spliced. The original video shows Ms. Jackson leaving the supply room with nothing in her hands. The gallery erupted again, louder this time. Amara's knees buckled, and she gripped the table for support. Claire's hand brushed hers, a silent anchor. And who had access to alter that footage? Claire asked, her voice calm but relentless. Ortiz swallowed. Only a few people have admin access to the security system. Ms. Phelps was one of them. The courtroom seemed to tilt. Karen Phelps shot to her feet, her face flushed. This is a lie, she shouted. I didn't touch that footage. But her voice cracked, and her eyes darted toward the exit, betraying her. Order! Judge Grayson roared, his gavel slamming repeatedly. But the room was alive now, the truth clawing its way to the surface. Amara felt a surge of strength, her baby kicking again as if in solidarity. She looked at Claire, who was already preparing her next move, her eyes blazing with purpose. Claire turned to the jury. Ladies and gentlemen, this case isn't just about a theft that never happened. It's about a woman targeted because of her race, her pregnancy, her very existence in a system that resents her strength. Ms. Jackson has spent her life caring for others, and yet she's been vilified, mocked, and framed. This affidavit, this testimony, is just the beginning. We will show you the truth, and the truth will set her free. The jury's faces were a kaleidoscope of emotions: anger, empathy, resolve. Amara felt their eyes on her, not with judgment now, but with something closer to understanding. She thought of her unborn child, of the world she wanted to bring them into, a world where justice wasn't just a word but a reality. Judge Grayson, visibly rattled, called for a recess. We'll reconvene in 1 hour, he muttered, his earlier arrogance replaced by unease. As the courtroom began to empty, Amara turned to Claire, her voice barely above a whisper. You didn't tell me about the affidavit. Claire smiled, a rare softness breaking through her fierce exterior. I didn't want to get your hopes up until I was sure. But we're not done yet, Amara. We're going to win this. As the crowd filtered out, Amara felt the weight of the moment settle over her. This wasn't just her fight, it was a fight for every person who'd been dismissed, dehumanized, or silenced. She touched her belly, feeling her baby's gentle kick, and made a silent promise. "We'll keep going. For you. For us." The recess ended, and the courtroom filled again, the tension thicker than ever. Daniel Ortiz resumed his testimony, detailing how he'd uncovered the tampered footage and traced it back to Karen Phelps' login credentials. Claire presented additional evidence text messages between Karen and a hospital administrator, hinting at a coordinated effort to discredit Amara. The messages were laced with racial undertones, each word a dagger that cut through the courtroom's pretense of impartiality. Karen, called back to the stand, crumbled under Claire's cross-examination. Her denials grew frantic, her composure unraveling as Claire pressed her on the texts, the footage, and her history of animosity toward Amara. "You didn't just want her fired," Claire said, her voice low and piercing. "You wanted her destroyed. Why?" Karen's eyes darted to the judge, then to the jury, finding no allies. I didn't mean it like that," she stammered. But the jury wasn't buying it. Their faces, once neutral, now burned with quiet outrage. Judge Grayson, sensing the tide turning, tried to regain control. "Ms. Evans, enough theatrics. Stick to the facts." "The facts?" Claire shot back, her voice rising. "The fact is, my client was targeted because of her race. The fact is, this court allowed her to be mocked and humiliated. The fact is, the truth is finally coming out." The gallery erupted in applause, forcing Grayson to slam his gavel again. Amara felt a swell of pride not just for herself, but for Claire, for Ortiz, for everyone who dared to stand up. She glanced at the jury, seeing the shift in their eyes. They were listening now. They were seeing her. As Claire prepared to call her next witness, a hospital administrator who'd agreed to testify about systemic bias in the workplace, Amara felt a spark of hope ignite into a flame. This wasn't just about clearing her name, it was about exposing a truth that could change everything. She thought of her child, of the future she wanted to build, and knew this fight was far from over. But for the first time, she believed they could win. The courtroom buzzed with restless energy as Claire Evans called her next witness, Dr. Margaret Lynn, the hospital's chief administrator. Dr. Lynn, a woman in her late 50s with a calm demeanor that belied her authority, took the stand with a measured grace. Amara watched her closely, her heart pounding. Claire had hinted that Dr. Lynn's testimony would be a turning point, but Amara couldn't shake the fear that the system would find a way to twist the truth again. Claire approached the stand, her voice steady but charged with purpose. "Dr. Lynn, can you confirm your role at St. Mary's Hospital and your knowledge of the workplace environment?" Dr. Lynn nodded, her expression somber. "I've been the chief administrator for 12 years. I oversee staffing, policies, and incident reports, including those involving Ms. Jackson." Her voice was clear, carrying the weight of someone who'd seen the hospital's inner workings, both its triumphs and its flaws. Claire held up a stack of documents, her eyes locked on the jury. "Dr. Lynn, can you tell us about the complaints filed against Ms. Karen Phelps regarding her treatment of minority staff, particularly Ms. Jackson?" The gallery leaned forward, the air thick with anticipation. Judge Grayson's face tightened, but he didn't interrupt. Dr. Lynn took a deep breath. "Over the past 3 years, we've received multiple complaints about Ms. Phelps' behavior toward minority employees, including Ms. Jackson. These ranged from microaggressions to outright discriminatory remarks. Most were dismissed due to lack of concrete evidence or because Ms. Phelps held a senior position." Amara's stomach churned. She remembered those moments, the snide comments about her work ethic, the way Karen would hover over her during shifts, questioning her every move. She'd reported them, hoping someone would listen, but the complaints had vanished into the hospital's bureaucratic void. Now, hearing Dr. Lynn lay it bare, Amara felt a mix of validation and rage. Claire pressed on. "And what about the hospital's response to these complaints? Were they investigated thoroughly?" Dr. Lynn hesitated, her eyes flickering with discomfort. "Not as thoroughly as they should have been. The hospital prioritized avoiding bad publicity over addressing systemic issues. Ms. Jackson's case was mishandled, and I take responsibility for that." The courtroom erupted in murmurs. Jurors exchanged glances, their expressions shifting from curiosity to indignation. Amara felt a tear slip down her cheek, but she didn't wipe it away. Let them see her pain, her humanity. Let them see what this fight cost her. Claire turned to the jury, her voice rising with controlled fury. This isn't just about one tampered video. It's about a system that let Ms. Jackson's complaints go unheard, that allowed a woman like Karen Phelps to weaponize her prejudice. Ms. Jackson wasn't just framed, she was silenced. Richard Holt, the opposing attorney, shot to his feet. Objection. Counsel is editorializing. His voice was desperate, his earlier confidence fraying at the edges. Sustained. Judge Grayson snapped, but his tone lacked conviction. The jury wasn't looking at him, they were looking at Amara, at Claire, at Dr. Lin. The truth was taking root, and no gavel could stop it. Claire didn't falter. She presented a series of emails between Karen and a hospital supervisor, outlining a plan to deal with problem staff. The emails didn't name Amara directly, but the implications were clear. Karen had targeted her, driven by resentment and racial bias. The jury's faces hardened as Claire read excerpts aloud, each word a nail in the coffin of Karen's credibility. When Karen was recalled to the stand, she was a shadow of her earlier self. Her hands shook, her eyes darting to the gallery as if searching for an escape. Claire's questions were relentless, each one peeling back another layer of Karen's deception. "Did you alter the security footage, Miss Phelps?" Claire asked, her voice like steel. "No." Karen cried, but her voice cracked, and the jury saw it. They saw the sweat on her brow, the way her hands twisted in her lap. They saw a woman caught in her own lies. "Then explain why your login was used to access the security system the night the footage was edited," Claire said, holding up a printout of the access logs. Karen opened her mouth, then closed it, her face crumpling. The courtroom was silent, the weight of her guilt suffocating. Judge Grayson called for another recess, his voice strained. As the gallery emptied, Amara turned to Claire, her voice barely audible. "Is it enough? Will they believe us?" Claire's eyes softened, but her resolve didn't waver. "It's more than enough, Amara. The jury sees the truth. We just need to push a little harder." The final day of the trial dawned with a storm brewing outside, thunder rumbling like a warning. Amara sat at the defendant's table, her hands resting on her belly, feeling her baby's steady kicks. She'd barely slept, haunted by the fear that the jury might still side against her. But Claire's confidence was a lifeline, and Amara clung to it. Claire's closing argument was a masterpiece of emotion and logic. She paced before the jury, her voice rising and falling like a preacher delivering a sermon. "This case isn't just about Amara Jackson. It's about every person who's been judged before they've had a chance to speak. It's about a system that lets prejudice fester, that rewards silence over justice. You have the power to change that today. You have the power to say, 'Enough.'" The jury listened, their faces a mix of resolve and sorrow. Amara watched them, her heart in her throat. She thought of her mother, who'd faced similar battles in her own life, and her grandmother who'd marched for civil rights. This fight was theirs too. Richard Holt's closing was predictably slick, painting Amara as a desperate woman grasping at straws. But his words fell flat, lacking the fire of truth. The jury's eyes drifted to Amara, to Claire, to the evidence that had dismantled the prosecution's case. Judge Grayson's instructions to the jury were curt, his earlier arrogance replaced by a grudging neutrality. As the jury filed out to deliberate, Amara felt a wave of nausea. Claire squeezed her hand. "They see you, Amara. They see the truth." The deliberation lasted 3 hours, each minute an eternity. Amara sat in a small waiting room, her hands clasped over her belly, whispering to her unborn child, "We're almost there, little one. We're almost free." When the jury returned, the courtroom was packed to the brim. Every seat filled, every breath held. The foreperson, a middle-aged black woman with kind eyes, stood to deliver the verdict. "We, the jury, find the defendant, Amara Jackson, not guilty on all charges." The room exploded. Amara's knees buckled, and Claire caught her, tears streaming down both their faces. The gallery cheered, some sobbing, others clapping. Judge Grayson's gavel was a futile gesture against the tide of emotion. Amara felt her baby kick, harder this time, as if celebrating with her. But the victory wasn't complete, not yet. Claire had one final move. She approached the bench, her voice clear and unwavering. Your Honor, in light of the evidence of misconduct, we request an investigation into Ms. Phelps' actions and the hospital's failure to address systemic bias. Grayson's face reddened, but he nodded curtly. Noted, the court will take it under advisement. It wasn't a promise, but it was a start. Amara knew the fight for justice didn't end with a verdict, it was a lifelong battle. As the courtroom emptied, reporters swarmed Amara, but Claire shielded her, guiding her to a quiet corner. You did it, Claire said, her voice thick with pride. You stood up, and you won. Amara shook her head, tears falling freely now. We did it. You, me, Dr. Lynn, Ortiz, everyone who spoke up. This isn't just my win. Claire smiled, her eyes shining. You're right. It's a win for all of us. In the weeks that followed, Amara's story spread like wildfire. The hospital launched an internal investigation, and Karen Phelps was fired, facing potential charges for evidence tampering. Amara returned to work, greeted by colleagues who'd once doubted her, but now offered apologies and support. She gave birth to a healthy girl, naming her Hope a reminder of what she'd fought for. The case sparked a broader conversation, not just in her town but across the country. People shared their own stories of prejudice, of systems that failed them, of small victories that lit the way forward. Amara read their words online, her heart swelling with pride and purpose. Her fight had become their fight, a beacon for change. As she sat with hope in her arms, Amara thought of the courtroom, of the judge's sneer, of Claire's fierce determination. She thought of the jury, ordinary people who'd chosen justice over bias. And she thought of her daughter, who'd grow up in a world that wasn't perfect but was worth fighting for. What do you think? Where does justice begin? And how do we heal the divides in our communities? Share your thoughts because this story belongs to all of us.